The most manipulated people in any room are not the weakest ones. They are the loudest ones. And the man no one can control, he barely says a word. What you're about to hear goes against everything modern culture tells you about confidence, success, and social power. You've been told to speak up, to assert yourself, to make your presence known. But there is a different kind of man, one who moves through the world like a ghost, who watches while others talk, who never reveals his hand, and who cannot be manipulated because there is simply nothing for a manipulator to grab onto. By the end of this, you will understand the psychological architecture of silence, why it works, how predators use noise against you, and how to become the kind of person who is, quite literally, invisible to those who would use you. This is not about being passive. This is about being dangerous in the quietest way possible. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Every time you speak unnecessarily, you are handing someone a weapon, not metaphorically. Literally, every word you say reveals a preference, a fear, a desire, an insecurity, or a belief. And any skilled manipulator, whether that's a toxic friend, a bad boss, a narcissistic partner, or a social climber, is collecting that information in real time, whether you realize it or not. There is a concept in social psychology called information asymmetry. It simply means whoever holds more information about the other person holds more power. Think about that for a moment. In every conversation you've ever had, there is a quiet contest happening beneath the surface. A contest over who knows more about whom. Most people lose this contest before they even realize it's happening. Why? Because they talk too much. Dr. Robert Cialdini, the psychologist behind the landmark book Influence, spent years studying how persuasion and manipulation work. One of his core findings was that people are manipulated most effectively through their own stated desires, fears, and values. Meaning, a manipulator doesn't need to invent a lever to control you. You build it for them. Every time you complain about your job, you've told someone your pressure point. Every time you brag about your plans, you've exposed your ambitions. Every time you explain your emotions unprompted, you've drawn a map to the places where you can be hurt. Consider the story of Kato Kiyomasa, one of Japan's legendary feudal generals. Historical accounts describe him as a man of almost unnervingly few words. In council meetings where other warlords debated loudly and argued their positions, Kiyomasa observed. He listened. He never revealed where he stood until the moment action was required. As a result, rival lords found it nearly impossible to strategize against him because they could not predict him. They could not profile him. He had given them nothing to work with. This is not just ancient military wisdom. This is modern psychological protection. There is a phenomenon documented in behavioral research called the liking information loop. When you share personal information with someone, even neutral information, you automatically like them more. You feel bonded. The problem is that bond is not always mutual. The other person now knows more about you than they've revealed about themselves, and if they are strategic about it, they will use that imbalance. Think about the last time someone asked you a lot of questions about yourself and seemed deeply interested. Did it feel good? Of course it did. That's the design. The skilled social predator doesn't demand information. They make you want to give it. The unnoticed man understands this mechanism. He is warm, engaged, and socially functional, but he is strategically incomplete. He never gives the full picture. He leaves gaps, and those gaps are what protect him. Here is the first principle. Silence is not absence. It is armor. Now let's go deeper, because silence is not just about protection. It is about something more counterintuitive. Being unnoticed is a form of dominance. This will sound wrong at first. Everything in modern culture says visibility equals power. Build your brand. Get followers. Be loud. Be seen. The loudest voice wins the room, but let's look at who actually wins, not the room, but life. In 2003, organizational psychologist Adam Grant began a long-term study of professional success across industries. What he found became the foundation of his book Give and Take, but one finding rarely gets discussed in the highlight reels. The people who rose to the highest, most stable positions of power were not the loudest in the room. They were the most observant. They were the ones who understood others deeply and revealed themselves slowly and deliberately. The loudest people were often the first to burn out, the first to be undermined, and the first to be manipulated, precisely because everyone could see their ambitions, their weaknesses, their needs. Now let's talk about a character who has become a cultural phenomenon in this context. You may have heard of Kiyotaka Ayanokoji from the anime classroom of the elite. His philosophy, though fictional, is a distillation of real psychological principles that researchers and strategists have understood for centuries. Ayanokoji deliberately suppresses his visibility. He presents himself as average, unambitious, almost boring. And through that deliberate invisibility, he controls outcomes that far more vocal, ambitious people around him cannot touch. He is, in the language of dark psychology, a dead-end target. There is nothing visible for an opponent to aim at. This is not fiction. This is strategy with a name: strategic ambiguity. Strategic ambiguity is a concept used in international diplomacy, high-stakes negotiation, and yes, social psychology. It refers to the deliberate practice of withholding enough information that other parties cannot accurately model your intentions or capabilities. Countries use it in nuclear deterrence. Corporations use it in merger negotiations. And the most psychologically sophisticated individuals use it in everyday social life. When people cannot categorize you, they cannot control you. When they cannot predict you, they cannot prepare against you. When they cannot understand your motivations, they cannot exploit them. But here's the part most people miss. The unnoticed man is not cold. He is not aloof. He is not antisocial. He is precisely warm enough to keep people at ease and precisely opaque enough to keep them slightly off balance. There is a psychological principle called optimal ambiguity, studied by social psychologist William Swan, Jr. In his research on self-verification, Swan found that people have an intense need to categorize others, to place them in social boxes. When someone resists categorization, the brain of the observer actually experiences mild cognitive discomfort. To resolve that discomfort, people often project more positive qualities onto the ambiguous person, because the brain prefers to fill uncertainty with favorable assumptions rather than sit with the unknown. In plain language, when you are slightly mysterious, people instinctively assume you are more capable, more intelligent, and more significant than you may actually be. The unnoticed man does not claim power. He allows the psychological architecture of human cognition to assign it to him. Now think about this in the context of manipulation resistance. Manipulation operates through known quantities. A manipulator uses guilt because they know you feel responsible for others. They use flattery because they know you crave validation. They use urgency because they know you fear missing out. These are all levers that only work if the manipulator knows where they are. The unnoticed man has, over time, systematically removed or hidden his levers. Not by suppressing his humanity, but by refusing to advertise his vulnerabilities. He still has desires, he still has fears, he still has a need for connection, but these are private. They are not on display. They are not offered freely in conversation, and without that information, even the most skilled manipulator is operating blind. This is the second principle. The man who cannot be profiled cannot be played. Let's get practical. Because understanding this concept intellectually is one thing. Embodying it changes your actual life. There are 5 disciplines the unnoticed man develops. Not rules, not techniques, disciplines, because they require consistent practice before they become natural. The first discipline is the pause. In every conversation, there is a moment, usually after someone says something emotionally charged, asks you a pointed question, or makes a provocative statement, where most people immediately react. They fill the silence with their feelings, their defense, their explanation. The unnoticed man pauses. He lets the silence exist for 2, 3, sometimes 5 seconds before responding. This is not rudeness. It is actually perceived as depth and confidence by most observers, but more importantly, it prevents reactive disclosure. When you react immediately, you often reveal more than you intended: emotional state, insecurity, fear. The pause creates a buffer between stimulus and response. The Stoics called this the pause between impulse and action, and Marcus Aurelius wrote about it repeatedly in his Meditations as one of the fundamental disciplines of a rational man. In neurological terms, the pause allows the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, to engage before the amygdala, the seat of emotional reaction, has fully hijacked your response. You are literally giving your wiser brain time to show up. The second discipline is selective disclosure. This does not mean lying. It means choosing carefully what you share with whom and when. A useful framework: before sharing personal information, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this person need to know this? Does knowing this give them more leverage over me than is appropriate for this relationship? Does sharing this serve a genuine purpose, or am I talking because I feel uncomfortable with silence? Most unnecessary disclosure, the kind that creates vulnerability, happens not because people want to share, but because they are uncomfortable with silence and fill it reflexively with personal information. The unnoticed man becomes comfortable with silence. He has done the inner work to sit with it rather than escape it. The third discipline is the question redirection. When someone asks you a pointed personal question about your finances, your relationships, your plans, your feelings, the untrained person either answers directly or deflects awkwardly, which itself signals something. The unnoticed man has a third option. He responds with genuine curiosity redirected at them, not evasively, not obviously. Something like, "That's interesting you ask, what made you think of that?" Or, "I'm still working through it. What's your read on the situation?" This is not manipulation. This is social judo. You redirect the energy without resistance. And the beautiful side effect is that most people, because of the liking information loop we discussed earlier, will feel more connected to you after a conversation in which you've learned a great deal about them and revealed very little about yourself. The fourth discipline is emotional containment in public. This is perhaps the hardest one. Strong emotions, anger, excitement, anxiety, pride, are the most visible of all your levers. And in public, social, or professional settings, they are the easiest for sophisticated observers to note and later exploit. The Stoic concept here is apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but the ability to experience an emotion without being controlled by it or broadcasting it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." A practical application. When you receive good news in a group setting, train yourself to respond with measured calm rather than visible excitement. Not because joy is wrong, but because visible excitement reveals what you want, and what you want can be withheld, dangled, or used as bait. Similarly, when provoked, the unnoticed man does not visibly react. The absence of a reaction is itself a power signal. It communicates that the provocation did not land, which is often enough to dissuade the provocateur entirely. The fifth discipline is the long silence, the strategic withdrawal. Periodically removing yourself from social circulation, going quiet on social media, being less available, declining non-essential invitations, creates something psychologically important. It makes your presence feel meaningful when it returns. People begin to notice your absence more than they noticed your presence. And when you re-emerge, there is a subtle increase in the value others assign to your attention and time. This mirrors the economic principle of scarcity. What is rare is valued. The man who is always available, always visible, always vocal is, by pure psychological economics, worth less attention than the man who appears selectively. This is the third principle. Silence, practiced deliberately, recalibrates how others value your presence. Now let me tell you a story, a real one. His name was Calvin Coolidge. He was the 30th President of the United States, and he may be the single greatest real-world case study in the power of deliberate silence in modern history. Coolidge was so famously quiet that he earned the nickname Silent Cal. There are dozens of documented anecdotes. At a White House dinner, a woman seated next to him reportedly told him she had made a bet that she could get him to say more than 2 words. Coolidge looked at her and said simply, "You lose." But here is what most people miss when they tell that story as a joke. Coolidge navigated one of the most politically treacherous decades in American history. He inherited the presidency after the sudden death of Warren G. Harding, whose administration was consumed by scandal, corruption, and chaos. Multiple cabinet members went to prison. The Teapot Dome scandal threatened to destroy the Republican Party. Coolidge, who had been vice president and therefore closely associated with the administration, should have been politically destroyed by association. He was not. Why? Because he had said almost nothing for years. He had given almost no one any material to use against him. His political enemies couldn't quote him, couldn't misrepresent him, couldn't point to promises he had broken or positions he had contradicted, because he had barely made any. He had kept his cards so close to his chest that even those who worked alongside him daily could not fully predict his thinking. The result? He served nearly 2 full terms, left office with remarkably high approval, and was judged by many contemporaries as the steady, unmanipulable center of an era defined by noise. Now Coolidge's silence was partly temperamental, but the lesson applies universally. The less you put on record, the less there is to be used against you. Let me give you a second, more intimate example, one that doesn't require the presidency. Think about someone you may know or may have been who overshared at work. Maybe it was you 5 years ago. You told your colleagues about your financial stress. You mentioned you were looking for other jobs. You shared your frustration with your manager in the break room. You vented about a difficult client over lunch. Now think about what happened. Did that information stay where you put it? Did it stay safe with the people you trusted? Or did it travel? Did it reach someone it shouldn't have reached? Did it change how you were treated, how you were managed, what opportunities came your way? This is not a hypothetical. Research on workplace dynamics consistently shows that emotional disclosure in professional environments, while it can create short-term bonding, most often works against the disclosure over time. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology found that employees who regularly shared personal struggles in professional settings were rated as less competent, less promotable, and more emotionally volatile by both peers and supervisors, regardless of actual performance. What the unnoticed man does in that scenario is not cold. He is collegial, professional, and pleasant to work with, but he keeps his inner life private. He does not complain about his manager to coworkers. He does not announce his ambitions. He does not advertise his frustrations. And when he moves, when he gets the promotion, when he lands the new opportunity, when he makes his play, it seems to come from nowhere. Because from the outside, there was nothing visible to suggest it was coming. This is how quiet people win in competitive environments, not by hiding their competence, by hiding their intentions, which protects their competence from being undermined before it can be deployed. And there is something deeper here that connects this to Stoic philosophy directly. Epictetus, the freed slave who became one of antiquity's most influential philosophers, taught something that sounds almost identical to this concept. He called it the discipline of desire, the practice of wanting things internally, privately, without broadcasting those wants into the world where circumstances and other people could frustrate them. Epictetus had been enslaved. He had lived in conditions where every visible desire was a vulnerability, where every expressed hope could be crushed to maintain control over him. His philosophy was built at its foundation on surviving and thriving inside a system designed to strip him of agency, and he did it almost entirely through the management of his inner world. He wrote, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." At its surface, that sounds like passive acceptance, but read it again through what we've been discussing. What Epictetus is describing is a man whose inner life is sovereign and private, who does not need the external world to validate, confirm, or deliver his desires because those desires are held internally and pursued quietly. He is not waiting for permission. He is not advertising his needs. He is not emotionally dependent on outcomes that others can see and therefore manipulate. That is the psychological architecture of the unnoticed man: private wanting, quiet action, opaque motive, and results that appear to those around him as almost mysterious. This is the fourth principle. The man who keeps his desires private keeps his power intact. Here is what I want you to do right now, not tomorrow, not after you finish the next video. Right now, before you scroll to something else and let this idea dissolve, think about one relationship, one environment, one recurring situation in your life where you have been talking too much, where you have been advertising your vulnerabilities, broadcasting your ambitions, or filling silence with words that have cost you more than you realized. Just one. And then sit with the question, what would change if, starting today, you became slightly harder to read? If that question does something to you, if it opens something up, then this channel is where you need to stay. MindsetMaster exists for exactly one reason: to give you the psychological frameworks that most people never encounter, never discuss, and rarely survive long enough in awareness to apply. If today's content added something real to your thinking, subscribe. Not because of a notification bell, but because the next video continues where this one ends. And the compounding effect of this kind of thinking, applied consistently, changes the fundamental quality of your life. Subscribe and come back. The next step is already waiting for you. There is a kind of man who moves through rooms and leaves no fingerprints. He is not invisible because he is insignificant. He is invisible because he has chosen to be. He has understood, through practice, through discipline, through Stoic philosophy refined over centuries and confirmed by modern psychology, that the greatest power available to a person in a world designed to manipulate, extract, and exploit is the power of deliberate withholding. He does not give you his anger when you provoke him. He does not give you his excitement when you dangle opportunity. He does not give you his fear when you threaten him. He does not give you his plans when you ask for them. And because he gives you none of these things, you cannot touch him, you cannot move him, you cannot predict him, you cannot play him. He is not cold, he is not empty. Inside, he is full of direction, full of desire, full of emotion, full of ambition. But that interior world belongs to him alone. It is his fortress, and it is unassailable precisely because it is unseen. The ancient Stoics understood this. Epictetus built his freedom on it while still in chains. Coolidge governed with it, and the most quietly effective men in every era of human history have known it intuitively or discovered it deliberately. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the power. Use it. Dark psychology, Stoicism, Sigma mindset manipulation tactics, silent man psychology, how to be unmanipulated, Ayanakoji psychology, dark psychology tricks, Stoic mindset, wealth mindset, high-performance habits, invisible man psychology, psychological power, Machiavelli strategy, mindset mastery description. Most people think silence is weakness. Dark psychology reveals the opposite truth. The man who says the least controls the most. In this video, MindsetMaster breaks down the psychological architecture of silence. Why talking too much makes you a target for manipulation. How the unnoticed man uses strategic ambiguity to become psychologically untouchable. And the Stoic philosophy behind withholding your desires from a world designed to exploit them. Drawing on real research from Dr. Robert Cialdini, Adam Grant, and behavioral psychology, plus the real-world case study of